I'd like to, sorry, just quickly
Yes.
if we can.
I think some cheerful news
Some,
also.
yeah, I mean some ideas which work. Next
Yeah.
slide, please. I'll just.
Yeah, that's true. Some ideas.
Sorry, this was just the graph which shows. This is, I'm not saying this. This is Environment Ministry data. It's 2013, and this, by the way, is only the projects which come to the center. This does not include state governments who also have the power to divert forests less than 40 hectares. Next slide. Next slide, next slide. As I said, because you raised this point of environmentalists being seen constantly as being, we don't offer suggestions, we're not proactive. So what changes do we want to see as environmentalists in India? And I'd like to see a movement from gross domestic product to gross environment product. This is not my term, I don't take any credit for it. There is a man called Anil Joshi who works in the Himalayas, and he actually coined this term, and he said that we need to account for things like how many rivers have we cleaned, how many households have we incentivized to switch to renewables, or how many cities did we clean up. We're talking about smart cities, but I haven't heard what these smart cities will do in terms of a low carbon footprint. Next slide. And just to give you an example, there are people out there doing some exciting work. There's Huss Power. This is a company in Bihar which actually gives the poor people access to renewable sources of energy. And the model is very interesting because the people, it's an economically viable model. The biggest challenge right now with renewables is that it's not economically at par with coal, which just becomes a cheap source of energy. Next slide. This is Daily Dump. I don't know if you've heard, anyone heard of them? Yeah? Okay, so it's quite exciting. This is a company in Bangalore which basically sells these exciting bright colored terracotta pots, and this teaches you how you can actually do composting in your house. And it's a green startup company, and I believe this is what we need to encourage. Next slide. I mentioned Anil Joshi because I followed the river Ganga for 6 months looking at the hydropower dams which were coming up in the upper reaches. And for me, this was a constant question that, as you also asked, how do we generate electricity for the poor? So he's come up with the water mills, which is basically helps in generating electricity at the village level. And he basically, what he did was, this is an indigenous technology, but he worked on it to make it more efficient. So he has set up thousands of these water mills across the Himalayas. So here are examples of some solutions. Next slide. And I'm just going to leave it on this particular species before we end. And Kavitha, if you have any more. And I'll just read a small extract from my book.
Oh yeah, I don't think I have too many more questions. Okay. So maybe you should read your, okay. Do you want to read your book first or go for questions first?
What would the audience like?
Read the book, yeah.
I'm going to read a very small portion. This is chapter 6. It's called Hooked on the Hulock. And that's the species that you can see. I'd seen my first gibbon not in the wild, but at the Delhi Zoo. I just left a boring desk job and was volunteering at the zoo for a few weeks, sweeping the animal cages, putting hay in the night shelters of the jackals and the chimpanzees so that they were not cold at night. The cages were smelly, the animals mostly grouchy and wary of the keepers, and their job included lifting their poop, but I thought, well, anything to be close to the animals. There was one creature that seemed quite forlorn every time I passed its cage. It sat by itself in the cold Delhi winter, its fingers tucked under its haunches at the edge of its bamboo perch, staring into space like a depressed soul. This animal, in fact, had always been all alone. In the wild, gibbons live in pairs, often mating for life like the Sarus crane. The plaintive hoo calls of the lonely gibbon would tear through the zoo enclosures early in the morning. Even after years of searching, the zoo authorities had been unable to find the gibbon a mate. Little did I know that a few years later, I would play a small part in this lonely animal's quest for a mate. And if you want to know how I helped it find a mate, you have to read the book.
Her book is very reminiscent of Gerald Durrell, if you have, read his books. It's not sentimental. It's focusing on solutions. Okay. Should we throw it open to questions because we wanted to have questions from the audience. Yeah.
Everybody, I think I'm loud enough. Anyway, the farmers and all have a massive problem with the monkeys. And I don't think, we can't touch them, you can't shoot them, you can't do anything. But we're losing a lot of produce to them, and there are problems, of course, with it. And what is a solution for that? I thought they needed to sterilize it, first of all. But, or set up sterilization camps or something like that.
Yes. So I, in fact, worked on a similar project in Delhi. And it's there in the book, so one more reason for you to read the book. But we looked at the conflict situation in Delhi. And I can tell you what should not be done. What generally happens is the residents, they'll call up the municipality, and what they'll do is they'll come and set up traps. And they can usually just trap 1 or 2 individuals. Invariably, it's the mother with the infant. That you create more fissions in the troop because you remove a few individuals, and the rest of the troop never gets trapped. So translocation, increasingly in conservation biology, we're now being told doesn't work, because what you do is you create a vacuum in that area, and if there are monkeys still, because you can never trap all hundred thousands of them. So what now we look at is something called in situ management, which is managing the problem as is, where is, looking at your sources of food, the garbage, setting up food centers which are away from conflict areas, and yes, sterilization. That is important. Someone needs to come forward and do this, and this has always been my problem with conservation biologists. They only want to work with endangered species. They don't want to look at how do we manage species which are commensal, which are living close to human beings. And you're absolutely right. I agree with you. We need to find a solution to this. The other worrying aspect is we don't see rhesus monkeys anymore. And I've been discussing this with primatologists. Maybe I know in your area you're seeing them. But I believe that there has been a population decline as well, and we need to address that.
Well, come to my place.
But sterilization, yes, it needs to be looked at, definitely.
Yeah,
and the sources of garbage, your forest department needs to look at. I believe they did run a very strong campaign asking people not to feed them. That needs to be done in a more strict way, because people come on Tuesdays and feed them.
Yeah, but out there they just go onto the fruit trees and grab the fruit and destroy the crop, or go pull out the carrots and whatever they find.
Right. Because there's no food for them. So we need, that's what I'm saying, the forest department. I mean, this is the problem which is happening even with elephants. If you, in the reserve forest, and I saw this in Karnataka, the jackfruit trees, the elephant would come to the jackfruit trees in the village, and that would create conflict. The forest department is planting eucalyptus in the forest. Now, that's not providing any source of food for the animals. So these are policies we need to look at as well.
What
areas
you can just give the...
In certain areas, they have red nets on the fruit trees, which are supposed to keep monkeys away.
All kinds of things have been tried. They've tried langurs, for instance, which also, but that works only for a very short period because they've become used to them. So I don't know. I mean, they're trying capsicum spray for elephants. So you could try. Maybe red nets is what you need to try. Probably got used to it.
Yeah, afterwards they were staring at me and scratching their bottoms and, not bothered about me.
I had a question about the farmers' suicides. And when you have a premise like where the development or environmentalism is anti-national, when it comes to agriculture, which had been the mainstay for this country for so long, the way we've treated our farmer communities, the way we've imported seeds that don't work on our soil, I'm just wondering what change can we anticipate in this area?
Very important question. And we need to look at agriculture, we need to look at farmers. Absolutely, I'm in complete agreement. Should we talk about GM crops here? We haven't at all. Well, the government is now going to allow trials. You're aware of that. They're going to allow field trials. So I'm sorry, I think it's again a worrying trend. I don't know what the sentiment in the room is, but that's just my personal opinion.
I think the sentiment in this room is fairly overwhelmingly green. And we are not seeing...
Good. That's a rare thing, it's good.
It is good, but we are not seeing people who really strongly believe in growth. And, you know, that's the...
Growth.
When I say growth, I mean like, you know, absolute growth which doesn't think of anything else. There are people like that as well, you know. We've been getting a lot of questions from them on Twitter, and we told them all to come here because it's such a complicated matter that you can't really reduce it down to, you know.
No, but you raise a valid point.
No, you raise a valid point.
I think that's an interesting point. Why do we see the two as
conflicting?
Yes. And why does growth not include environment indicators as well?
Yes. Right.
Exactly. No. I think we're just so used to being attacked all the time that it's just a defense mechanism which comes up.
I have a question about, you mentioned some of the startups and some of the small organizations. So do you think that these startups should be scaled up so that they impact a larger number of people, or do you think that it's better for like a more number of startups in more places which are more organically developed? So do you think these need to go large scale, or do you think we need more of these?
I actually chose these examples because they can be scaled up. The Bangalore company, Daily Dump, in fact, encourages people to come forward and become entrepreneurs, and you can sign up with them and start. So you don't just buy the pot, you can actually become a Daily Dump advocate. That's the name of the product, by the way, Daily Dump. So, I mean, if it grows organically, why not? But I was just trying to say that there are examples out there, and they can be scaled up. Hus Power is already scaling up. They are going to other villages. And that's why they work, because that's one of the criticisms against these small startups, that you know, you can't scale them up, they're not financially viable. But they've actually shown that they're growing. And you know, we keep talking about, I mean, I believe Prime Minister Modi is next door, so he can't hear us, but we've been talking about Clean India, and this is, you know, one of the ways we can have a clean India. So.
If I could intervene, I think so many times you have a great idea and there are no systems to enforce it, because I am from Bangalore and we have garbage all across the roads, and now the BBMP has you know, introduced that you absolutely have to segregate your garbage. So we do segregate your garbage, and then you go